Well, I have been waiting to say this for a long, long time. The RotoBros Fantasy Football Podcast is live, baby. We are live across Twitter, across Facebook, across YouTube. We are here, Mark. We have arrived. You remember when SportsCenter, when ESPN took SportsCenter off of being pre-recorded and decided to do it live? This is bigger than that. This is bigger than that, and I am so stoked because, again, we are live. This is the first time we're doing it. Now, you can always listen to the RotoBros podcast everywhere you would listen to podcasts. So wherever you find them, they're still going to be there. This show's going to be there, but you also have an additional option now to listen and watch the show as it's actually going on, and you can see Mark's terrible sunglasses. So you guys get a great treat. You get my beautiful, beautiful beard and Mark's terrible sunglasses.
Egregious take. Egregious take. Pit Vipers are freaking awesome, especially when you work construction like I am. They're Z87 approved. They're polarized. There is nothing better in the world to protect your eyes than Pit Vipers. You got to be freaking kidding me.
Hey,
terrible take.
Raise hail, praise Dale. Am I right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Intimidators, baby. Victory Lane Intimidators.
There you go. Okay, so real quick, I do want to mention, for a lot of people that don't know, Mark, did you know that that DJ Moore changed his number from 12 to 2 to indicate to us, pulling back the curtain a little bit, that moving forward, he will be the number 2 wide receiver for the Panthers because he's the second best receiver on the team. Terrace Marshall.
You can't honestly believe these words you're saying. Do you honestly believe that a guy before turning 25 years old who has 1,200 total yard seasons in the NFL and has proven that he is quarterback proof? He's dealt with Teddy Bridgewater, Kyle Allen, and broken Cam Newton as his quarterback and has still managed to go over 1,200 total yards in each of the last 2 seasons. And you honestly believe that Terrace Marshall is going to just immediately usurp him as the best wide receiver on the team? Listen, I would put DJ Moore close to the same realm as Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. I would put him that close because if DJ Moore had gone to LSU and not Maryland, he would have had the hyper-productive seasons similar to Chase and Justin Jefferson. So I think that is such a ridiculous take, and I am on Terrace Marshall in rookie drafts. I think Terrace Marshall in the mid-second round of a rookie draft is a value. But for you to just assume that Terrace Marshall is immediately the best wide receiver on this team is an egregious take, and you're going to burn for that one.
Okay, no, look, I love Terrace Marshall. I think he's got this this Hakeem Nicks style of play. We all remember how good Hakeem Nicks was for a period of time. And then, of course, I think he plays with the speed of like a Devontae Parker. So I love Terrace Marshall moving forward. I don't think he's better than DJ Moore right now. And I agree with you. I think DJ Moore, if he played, across from Adam Thielen with Kirk Cousins on the Vikings offense, he's going to be close to what Justin Jefferson was doing. Like there is no doubt in my mind. I love DJ Moore. We love him here, but my whole thing is, it's, and we've had this discussion before on some previous shows, which everybody watching live can check out. But yeah, look, I just kind of had to tease you about that a little bit. But hey, I wanted to ask you because we had an interesting one of our RotoBros patrons, and we'll talk about the RotoBros Patreon here in just a moment. But one of our patrons, Jonathan Dow, so he had a trade offer that he posted in there today. And I found it pretty interesting because I think it could really go either way. Now, I think I know obviously how I directed him to go. But I think you would probably agree with as well. But the trade offer was he would get Stephon Diggs and a 2023 second round pick, and he would give up CeeDee Lamb. So, of course, you and I are CeeDee Lamb guys. Like, we think he's a top 5 dino receiver. So I told him, I'm like, look, it's not a terrible offer. Like, I'm not insulted by it. But I'm not giving up CeeDee Lamb for that. Like, see if you, maybe for all we know, that guy's a Cowboys fan. See what you can give up. Or see what this guy is potentially willing to give up for CeeDee Lamb. But, that's not a trade that I'm gonna suggest anybody do for Stephon Diggs personally.
I think trading CeeDee Lamb especially in a dynasty league, is extremely risky. The upside with Lamb. I mean, could you imagine drafting in the NFL draft? Could you imagine drafting Henry Ruggs over CeeDee Lamb? Like the Raiders literally just looked at CeeDee Lamb and were just like, nah, we're good. We're gonna take the stretch Z receiver instead of the full blown alpha with the all purpose wide receiver skill set. Couldn't believe it, but
it made no sense to me. But
it's really hard though, because I mean, Stephon Diggs is in his super prime. I think if you trade for Stephon Diggs right now in a dynasty league where his value is as high as it probably will ever go, you need to have Josh Allen. You need to have Josh Allen so you can complete that stack. That was probably the most successful stack in seasonal and best ball leagues last year. It had a win rate twice what the baseline win rate for a 12-teamer is. So if you're going out and trading for Stephon Diggs right now, I think you need to already have Josh Allen. Because if you go and try and trade for the entire stack right now, you're giving up too much. I would be more inclined to trade for Dak Prescott if I already had CeeDee Lamb than trying to trade for Stephon Diggs right now. I would be trying to make as many plus EV moves for my lineup as I possibly can. And I think going out and trading for Stephon Diggs right now and losing CeeDee Lamb, the super young, just had a super productive rookie season, I think you're just better off. You're gaining more expected value by going out and trying to trade for Dak Prescott and completing that stack than trying to trade for Stephon Diggs. And then it's just like, all right, I didn't gain any EV here by getting Stephon Diggs. You'd just be better off holding CeeDee Lamb and trying to complete that stack, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I had that in mind as I was telling Dow. I'm like, I want CeeDee, regardless of if I have Josh Allen or even if I had Josh Allen, personally, I want CeeDee Lamb. Like, I want to be tied to Dak Prescott as much as possible. So I want Lamb, I want Cooper, I want Zeke. So I'm going to take CeeDee Lamb, across the board, regardless of who my quarterback is. But, if I have Dak Prescott, and you and I have both agreed, Dak's going to win MVP this year. And I think we pretty much agree that the Cowboys are going to run through that division. I mean, they're going to tear through the NFC East. And so, at least I believe so. And I think they're going to be one hell of a football team this year. And I think Dak's going to be a big reason for that. This is an offensive league now, and they have that firepower where they can compete and outscore anybody. And so, look, I want CeeDee Lamb as my wide receiver. If I can have him right now, you could get him as your wide receiver 2. Like, you could literally have him as a wide receiver 2. You're going to have to sacrifice a little probably in the third round. You can't go like running back. But, for me, I want all the CeeDee Lamb I can get. So I'm taking CeeDee regardless. But it's not, like I said, it's not a bad offer. But again, like you said, getting into this stacks conversation, not only just in best ball, but also across the board in fantasy, it's important. And I think, with a guy like CeeDee Lamb or Stephon Diggs led the league last year in targets with 166. He had 6 more targets than DeAndre Hopkins, who's, perennially at the top of the leaderboard at the NFL in targets. So Stephon Diggs obviously had a hell of a season last year, and he's going to have a hell of a season this year. But I do think we've probably seen the tip of the iceberg with Stephon Diggs. I don't think you're going anywhere higher with that with Stephon Diggs. So I think, to me, I'm going to capitalize on more of an upside with CeeDee Lamb, and especially like you said, if you're able to stack him with Dak. But these stacks in fantasy, I think people don't think about them as much and view them as important as they actually are, and how essential they can be. And we talk about it all the time in best ball, but not as much in dynasty and redraft and really any form of fantasy. It's an essential strategy, and you really want to try to adopt it as best as you can.
Exactly. And like I said earlier about the best ball win rate scenario, I've been doing a lot of research with best ball win rates. And something to keep in mind is that best ball win rates can somewhat correlate to seasonal leagues as well. You want to stack in both. And I think people have this idea that because best ball is a different game than seasonal leagues, because you're not managed, people are even just calling managed leagues now because best ball has gotten so popular. You still want to be stacking somewhat aggressively in managed leagues. For example, you look at what teams that stacked Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs were able to do. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs stacks had a win rate of almost 34%. You automatically, just by participating in a 12-team league, have a baseline win rate of about 8.3%. So you take your baseline win rate of 8.3% and you look at what Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs stacked teams were able to do. They were winning leagues at a 34% clip. So you are strongly increasing your chances of winning by building correlation in your lineups and your rosters and stacking aggressively. And you still want to be doing this in seasonal leagues. Now, if you had to ask me what is the Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs stack this year that could be winning leagues, the first one that immediately comes to my mind, I think of Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, or Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase.
Exactly what I was going to say. I 100% agree. Now, I have another one for you. Mark. Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith. I've been talking about it all offseason. I think Devontae Smith is going to win people fantasy championships. He's going to win you leagues. That's one of my favorite stacks.
Okay, so explain to me, and now we're going off track here, but you pissed me off so much on Twitter this morning. Explain to me how 170-pound Devonta Smith is a league winner, but suddenly 5'7", 180-pound Rondale Moore is too small to be successful in the NFL. I think that's awfully hypocritical, man. Fix your process.
It's not that he's, again, that's the thing that I keep having to come back to with Rondale Moore. I love Rondale Moore, the player. I love Rondale Moore, the talent. I love Rondale Moore in real life. I don't want pieces of Rondale Moore in fantasy outside of like a DFS tournament, because guys like that profile like him and have the injury history that he has, they hardly ever, if ever, pan out to be fantasy assets in any way. And when I'm going to select in the rookie draft, where's Rondale Moore going? Early to mid-second round. He's going in the same range as Jalen Waddle, Elijah Moore, Rashad Bateman, Terrace Marshall, even Amari Rodgers. So none of those guys I am going to bypass for Rondale Moore, who profiles as, look, I'm not somebody who looks at height. Okay, Maurice Jones-Drew was one of my first fantasy draft picks when I started my fantasy career. Height has nothing to do with it for me. But when you couple that with the fact that he does have a high injury history, they are talking about manufacturing touches with jet sweeps and things of that nature. Those are the types of things that, from a fantasy perspective, I don't want to have anything to do with, because it never works out. It never works out. And these are guys that you cannot put into your fantasy lineup and expect them. You're trying to guess which week you're going to have the, 4-catch, 89-yard, 76-yard touchdown catch week like a KJ Hamler. To me, he's smaller than KJ Hamler in totality. So to me, that's the type of player.
He's shorter. He's not lighter.
Okay. Well, regardless, he's from that standpoint, he's still smaller. That's the type of player and the type of stat lines I think we're going to see. That consistency, that volume, I don't think it's going to be there. And so I think it is going to be there for Devontae Smith. We know Jalen Reagor is not a wide receiver one. He proved that last year, even though he was a rookie. He's not an alpha receiver in this league, which is fine. Okay, we both think Jalen Reagor could be on an upswing as the beta receiver this year. But Devontae Smith, to me, he's another version of Deshaun Jackson. When Deshaun Jackson came out, nobody thought he would be an alpha receiver. Nobody thought it would be Jeremy Maclin several years later after that. Both of them ended up being impactful week-to-week alpha receivers, both in real life and fantasy. So he profiles as a completely different type of player as Rondale Moore. So that's why I really love this Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith stat, because we know they're going to be throwing all over the place. We've established that the offensive line should be a little bit better. Okay, we know the defense isn't going to be great. They're going to be throwing all over the place, and they're going to have to throw to keep up because their defense is so bad. So, and this NFC East division is so competitive. So you're competing with the Giants, who on paper have obviously a great offense, the Redskins, who should be much better in the passing game, and then of course the mighty Dallas Cowboys, who you and I both think are on a massive skyrocket, if you will. And so that, to me, that's why I'm going after Devontae Smith, and I think he is going to be. He and Jalen Hurts are going to absolutely be an amazing combination this year.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. Jalen Hurts is my highest owned player on Underdog by a lot. I have 34% Jalen Hurts across. I'm almost at 60 drafts right now. So I'm not going to sit here and argue that Jalen Hurts, Devonta Smith can't be a league-winning stack. I'm with you. I've also got a hefty amount of Jalen Hurts, Jalen Reagor, because Reagor is just so cheap. His ADP is starting to go up as well on Underdog, so I'm kind of starting to move away from Jalen Reagor. However, one thing I do want to make sure we touch on too is that you can still gain EV by stacking your quarterback with their running back, especially in a situation like Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders.
Yep.
Now, I am a very big rosters, not players type of guy, or like Jordan Cooper from RotoGrinders likes to say, lineups, not players, when he's talking about DFS. You can adopt that strategy to your seasonal league or your best ball league, and you're still going to gain the same amount of EV from it. You can stack Jalen Reagor with one of his pass catchers because he's going to have games where he attempts 40 or 45 passes. But if they're running read options with Jalen Hurts, again, super productive rushing quarterback, he's going to be freezing linebackers and opening up massive holes for Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders was a bell cow last year. We didn't get the production we wanted from a guy that was being drafted at the 1-2 turn, but he's in a position via the Alfred Morris corollary that Matt Kelly has coined. We're in a position where he could have another 5 yards per carry season. And we did, albeit a small sample, we did see Jalen Hurts be comfortable targeting Miles Sanders out of the backfield. Sanders has a 50-catch season on his resume already in 2 years. He's got a 1,300-yard season on his resume as a rookie. He was still efficient last year. He wasn't as efficient of a receiver, but Carson Wentz was neutering that offense. And whatever reason you have for why Carson Wentz was as bad as he was, Jalen Hurts is good for this offense because he is going to be able to create in ways that Carson Wentz couldn't. And while everyone is projecting this Eagles team to be one of the worst in the NFL, and I'm not even going to argue against that, I think the offense could be extremely productive in a division that is going to have a lot of high-octane offenses. We're talking about 2 games against the Cowboys, 2 potential shootouts with the Cowboys, 2 games against the Giants, 2 more potential shootouts if Daniel Jones can ascend as a player with these new weapons he has with Kenny Golladay and Kadarius Toney. Darius Slayton is still there. He's getting Saquon Barkley back. Daniel Jones. Sterling Shepard, everyone in this offense, sans maybe Golladay, is of value. And I think that the case can be made for everyone in the NFC East. I'm comfortable attacking the entire division, but it all starts for me with Jalen Hurts because he has the most upside right next to Dak Prescott. You could almost argue that if he starts all 17 games, Jalen Hurts might have more fantasy upside than Dak Prescott. I know that's going to be crazy for people to hear, but you can. I get it. I get that it sounds crazy. But if he starts every single game, we could potentially be looking at a 4,000-yard passer and a 1,000-yard rusher. It's the inverse CMC season, where he has the 1K season. We could see that from Jalen Hurts, and he doesn't even have to be good to get there. He just needs to be productive in the sense that the team is trailing a lot, he's throwing a lot, and he's making things happen with his legs. We know he's going to produce as a rusher. All we need to do is see him produce as a thrower as well. And he already threw for 300 yards once in one of his 3 career starts. So he's got it in him to do that. So I'm comfortable stacking Jalen Hurts with Devonta Smith and with Miles Sanders on the same best ball team. I probably wouldn't be that aggressive in a seasonal league, but I would be okay stacking Hurts with Sanders or Devonta Smith in a seasonal league.
Yeah, no, I'm in total agreement with that. And now the Redskins games, those might be a little bit of a different story because I don't give a damn how good that offensive line is for the Eagles right now. Man, competing with that front seven is going to be a tall task for anybody. But like you said, I think Jalen Hurts he has that upside. Now neither one of us are going to go out and say that Jalen Hurts is going to outscore Dak Prescott or is the odds are in his favor to do so. We don't believe that. It can happen. Yes, it is there. And like you're higher on Miles Sanders than I am. I think Kenny Gainwell is going to be pretty heavily involved in this offense, in this backfield, so that Miles Sanders doesn't have to, take on that workload because he has struggled with injuries in the past. But again, there's a lot of stacks that you could go for, and I like that you mentioned quarterbacks and running back stacks because when people talk about stacks, all they're really thinking about is QB, wide receiver, naturally. But there's other stacks you can do, quarterback and running back, even quarterback and tight end with, Patton and Travis or Derek and Darren and guys like that. But another quarterback running back stack I think people need to look at is Justin Herbert and Austin Eckler. I think that's another. Now, you don't want to go stack Justin Fields with David Montgomery because Tariq Cohen is back. So you don't really want to test the stack waters with that quarterback running back combo. But with a combo with a guy with the touch security of Austin Eckler that's going to be catching so many passes out of the backfield from Justin Herbert, I think that's another great stack. You don't just have to, hope that you can get Herbert and Keenan Allen or even BMW later. To be honest with you, I'd rather forego BMW on that in that stack and stack Herbert with Eckler right after Herbert and Keenan Allen. So that's kind of where I'm at on these Chargers stacks, to be honest with you.
I don't think that's bad process at all. The only thing behind that is it's significantly harder to make that stack work, especially in an underdog league, mainly because you have to draft Austin Eckler at the 1-2 turn, whereas you can get Justin Herbert at like the 7-8 turn. And what I found myself doing, I have a lot of Justin Herbert as well, and I'm a little apprehensive on Herbert. He was one of the best deep ball passers in the league, which is always great for fantasy upside. He was a little more shaky on the intermediate passing, which is more stable. If a guy is good on the intermediate passing, you can expect him to be good there year over year. When he's super good on deep passing, that's less stable. That is more fragile, and that's where you could see some regression. However, I like the idea of stacking Justin Herbert with Mike Williams because you can kind of, especially if you're drafting at the 1-2 turn, you can end up getting Austin Eckler there. And then at the 7-8 turn, you can get Justin Herbert, Mike Williams. So you don't, it's a lot easier to plan out your stacks that way. And that's why whenever I'm drafting, I'm not trying to plan my stacks several rounds in advance. Like sometimes you do it. If you take Keenan Allen at the 2-3 turn, it's like, all right, I can plan on getting Justin Herbert somewhere in the 7th or 8th round. That's completely fine. That makes a ton of sense. Or same with like if you take AJ Brown, I'm going to try and get Ryan Tannehill in the 10th or 11th round. But with Justin Herbert, he's so easy to stack with Mike Williams because they're going back and secure that stack and then maximize your variance and upside by taking Tyron Johnson or Jared Cook at the end of your draft. So then you've got a 3-man stack with the quarterback on top. But regardless, I love what you're saying about stacking Justin Herbert with Austin Eckler. I think that makes a ton of sense. And you can do the exact same thing with Travis Etienne in the 5th round, and then in the 11th round, getting Trevor Lawrence. Something people forget about Trevor Lawrence is he is a running quarterback as well. He is mobile, and he's probably going to rush for 400 or 500 yards this year, which makes him he's a fringe Konami code quarterback, and that's the thesis behind drafting him in best ball and seasonal leagues. He could have an extremely productive rookie year, mainly because we believe he is a generational passer, but is also mobile on top of everything. But he's going to be throwing to Travis Etienne out of the backfield. Travis Etienne was drafted in the 1st round. He's got that multi-purpose skill set, hyper athletic. He's built for the position. He's built to be a bell cow. He can hit home runs. And if you're stacking Trevor Lawrence with anybody, I think Travis Etienne makes the most sense, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah, and look, I love there's been a lot of, negativity thrown toward DJ Chark's way, right? So this offseason with Urban Meyer talking about he didn't really see a lot of DJ Chark being special on film. But look, he's got the size. He answers the size speed combination. He checks that box. He's even bulked up this offseason. So that I think is really going to help DJ. And look, he's the number 1 receiver on this team, at least for right now. Now they brought in Marvin Jones. There's a lot of hype about Laviska Shenault that I'm not buying into. I think you are. But I don't think you're buying into Laviska really being the number 1, the alpha receiver. I think we both agree that it's probably going to be Chark. To what extent, we will find out. But look, DJ Chark to me is still a value. And I think DJ Chark has that upside. Much like you said, Jalen Hurts has that upside to even outscore someone like Dak. DJ Chark has the upside to outscore someone even like Justin Jefferson. I mean, as crazy as that sounds, like he really, really does. And so I think that's another Trevor Lawrence stack that you can look at. But look, like you said, if Travis Etienne is an excellent stack with Trevor Lawrence, because we have talked about it on multiple times here on multiple shows with multiple guests on the show. Travis Etienne has that upside and that he has that ceiling to be in the Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara range. Now, he's not going to do it while James Robinson is healthy and while James Robinson is getting a plethora of work. So if James Robinson, if they are trying to do this this Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt sort of thing. Travis Etienne can be in that Kareem Hunt category, and I think he will be, year one. He'll be in that same range. But if drafting Travis in the first round is indicative of the fact that they actually don't believe in James Robinson long term and they don't want to use him as a workhorse, that's going to be a really good thing for Travis Etienne because, again, that's just going to be more work for him, more touch security for him, and the way that he plays, his profile, his skill set, how he's likely to be used in that offense, he has the upside to have a Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara type of season, and Travis Etienne could absolutely be a guy that booms this year and ends up winning some leagues if he can usurp James Robinson for a lot of those touches. There's some other stacks that I like as well. Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now look, if you're waiting a while, okay, to get a quarterback in Superflex, the question is going to be, okay, we'll have Fitzmagic for 9 weeks. How long until it turns into Fitztragic, right? So that's the dice that you're always going to roll with Ryan Fitzpatrick. But you can always try and roll the dice there, even if he is your number 2 quarterback. I think you could do a lot worse than Fitzpatrick this year as your number 2 in Superflex or 2 QB leagues. And if you can get Terry McLaurin as your wide receiver 2, I think that's a pretty solid stack as well. Obviously, it goes without saying, Cousins and Jefferson, Cousins and Thielen. One of our favorites that we've talked about a lot as well, Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp, man. Like, that is one of my favorite stacks of the season, probably my second favorite stack after the Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith stack. I think Cooper Kupp is going to be right back at that season that he had in 2019 where he was, a top 10 fantasy wide receiver, a rock-solid wide receiver 1. And, he didn't start many games last year. That's the amazing thing about Cooper Kupp. Look at the games that he started. Like, he's been durable, and he's played most of these games, but he didn't start. I mean, he was in the single digit. I think it was like 5 games, 3 to 5 games or something last year. But he did not start very many games at all last season. So if that changes this year, which I expect it will, that's going to be huge, I think, for Stafford and Kupp, especially when you get a big quarterback upgrade on this offense.
I agree with you. I mean, Stafford is somebody that I'm heavily targeting in drafts as well, but he, being that he is more of the immobile persuasion, similar to a Matt Ryan or a Jared Goff or a Tom Brady, you have to stack him with somebody. Even in a seasonal league, if you're drafting Matthew Stafford as your starter and not getting Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods, or even you could even take Tyler Higbee, and I won't argue with you. I know you're completely out on Higbee, but you can at least understand why Higbee would make a ton of sense. Like, if you don't get Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods, but Matthew Stafford falls to you, you need to acquire Tyler Higbee because he's going to have the lowest opportunity cost of any starter on that team to stack him with. And you are still going to gain so much expected value just by stacking Stafford with Tyler Higbee as your tight end. And that's really all that matters. And we can go back to saying rosters, not players, or lineups, not players. It just makes so much more sense. Like, you have your choice between Tyler Higbee and Noah Fant, but your quarterback is Matthew Stafford. You take Tyler Higbee every time and get that correlation, increase your variance, and maximize your upside.
Okay, but here's another question, because you talk about the rosters, not players. But the thing about it is if I'm on the clock, there's no way in hell I'm going to take Tyler Higbee. I don't care if I have Matthew Stafford as my quarterback. I'm not taking Tyler Higbee over even Adam Troutman, who you and I, and I think the majority of the fantasy community view Adam Troutman as a breakout tight end, especially with the fact that Michael Thomas is probably going to miss the vast majority of the season, if not the entire fantasy regular season. Like, that is in his, you're going to be proud of me for this, range of outcomes for Michael Thomas, is he could miss the entire fantasy regular season with this ankle injury. So, especially with his style of play, the type of receiver he is, this is not a friendly injury to receivers. So, I can't bring myself to say, okay, I'm going to take Higbee only because I have Matthew Stafford. I'm going to take Higbee over somebody like Adam Troutman. What if Zach Ertz goes to the Bills? We know Zach Ertz probably isn't going to play for the Eagles this year. He probably isn't. But even if he does, I would feel better with Zach Ertz than I would with Tyler Higbee personally. And I mean, if we're talking about some of that draft variance, Higbee's going as tight end 15 in Superflex leagues, and then you've got Robert Tonyan at 12, Rob Gronkowski at 11. Like, to me, those are guys that I would trust more than Tyler Higbee. Now, we get into the Jared Cooks and the Jonnu Smiths and the Evan Ingrams. Now we're having a different conversation. But for me, I use Troutman as a guy who just, even before Michael Thomas's injury, a lot of us thought he was going to be a breakout. Now with Michael Thomas not there, I don't care who the New Orleans quarterback is. Adam Troutman is the biggest beneficiary. Everybody's going out and adding, Traquan Smith and Marquez Callaway. Adam Troutman is the guy that benefits the most from this Michael Thomas injury, in my opinion, because he's going to be productive and targeted a lot, no matter if it's Taysom or Jameis under center.
I've been on the Troutman train for months, and I mean, you were on it before, jumped off, and now you're back on it with Michael Thomas out.
I am.
And
Welcome me back.
Yeah, and no one should be disagreeing with you. I loved Adam Troutman as a prospect. He was one of my favorite tight ends in the draft last year. I always thought he was better than Cole Kmet. Like, if you ask me, Cole Kmet in the second round of an NFL draft or Adam Troutman in the third, I wish the Bears would have just taken Adam Troutman a little later and used their second round pick on a wide receiver, on a potential Allen Robinson replacement. I don't have the draft in front of me. I don't know who else was available next to Jalen Johnson and Cole Kmet. I just wish they would have taken a wide receiver there and taken Adam Troutman late. Adam Troutman, he's a very similar player to Cole Kmet in the sense that he was a productive receiver in college. He's got good receiving metrics, and he's very athletic. But at the same time, he offers so much as a blocker, as a run blocker. So Adam Troutman has a path to 80 or 90% snaps every week on this team. But Tyler Higbee played at least 80% of the snaps in 9 of 16 games last year. We know he's a starter. They got rid of Gerald Everett. So unless Jacob Harris, which is possible, I think Jacob Harris is a good prospect, but unless a rookie tight end like Jacob Harris comes in and completely usurps Tyler Higbee right away, which I just don't see happening, I think that's a really low probability bet to make. Tyler Higbee is going to be starting. We're hoping with Matthew Stafford under center that this team is going to be significantly more pass heavy than they've been over the last year and a half or so. And I'd be kind of surprised if they weren't, just based on how their lineup is or how their entire roster is structured. They lost Cam Akers. You can probably bet on their pass rate increasing beyond what it was. Beyond what it was going to be with Cam Akers. You can expect them to throw more. So that's why I am completely comfortable. If I don't have a tight end, but I have Matthew Stafford, I would rather take Tyler Higbee than Robert Tonyan or Gerald Everett or Evan Ingram, or maybe not Logan Thomas, because I think Logan Thomas has a clear path to 110 plus targets again. But Tyler Higbee just makes a ton of sense. Number one, we've seen him be an incredibly high producer at the NFL level before. He's capable of having spike weeks. And if you don't get a Darren Waller, a Travis Kelce, a George Kittle, or like a TJ Hawkinson, that's all you're looking for at that point. You're looking for spike weeks because you're not going to find consistent production. Yeah, you're not going to find consistent tight end production outside of the top 4 or 5 tight ends. You're just looking for spike weeks at that point, which is something Tyler Higbee is capable of producing. And when you correlate him with your quarterback, like I said, you increase that variance a little bit, you lower your floor, but your ceiling is high enough to win you a week. And that's why I'm comfortable taking Higbee where I am. I'm not in love with the player. I'm not infatuated with the player by any means. But because we know how plus EV stacking is in DFS, best ball, seasonal, dynasty, it doesn't matter. You are increasing your win probability week to week, and you're increasing the win probability of winning your whole league by stacking Tyler Higbee with Matthew Stafford. That's the whole principle behind it, is just increasing your upside. And you can't argue that Tyler Higbee doesn't do that if you already have Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, and it just, for me, again, it's if we truly believe that and we're just using this as an example because I think it's the best one we have via the ADPs for Superflex leagues. Adam Troutman versus Tyler Higbee, I mean, on the surface, what is there not to like about Adam Troutman? Now, look, I agree with you. I think Adam Troutman is probably every bit as good as what Cole Kmet is. I think Cole Kmet is more of a sort of Jason Witten-esque, Kyle Rudolph-esque sort of tight end. He's not going to wow you. He's not going to, run away from you. And, I don't think he's ever going to be this, Jimmy Graham, fantasy dynamo tight end, but he's going to be in this league for a long, long time. I think he's going to be really good when they decide that Jimmy Graham is no longer, relevant. up in Chicago, whenever that may be, because apparently it's not right now. But again, I feel like at one point you did make that I do like, and I will fold to you on this, is losing Gerald Everett, because that's the entire reason. 2 years ago, what did we see? Tyler Higbee having this ridiculously fluky season, okay? And we only saw it when Gerald Everett was off the field. And I told everybody, I said it in the Fantasy Black Book, that you can find on Amazon, by the way. Check that out. I said it in the Fantasy Black Book. We had a section where there are guys that you want to buy into and guys you want to sell. Tyler Higbee was my number one sell above everybody last year, and that was why, because Gerald Everett was coming back, he was going to be healthy, and we saw that Tyler Higbee did not do what we thought he was going to do after the 2019 season. So for me, I do agree with you there, and that is the sole reason why I would probably take him over a guy like Evan Ingram or a Jonnu Smith or a Hunter Henry or something like that. But for Adam Troutman, you're looking at it on paper, and at that ADP, I can't justify Troutman's situation and the upside as a player himself and the talent and the role that he's going to play over a guy like Tyler Higbee. So to me, it still comes down to ADPs, because you already know how I play. I'm looking at, okay, I like this player in fantasy, but does it make sense at the ADP right around where other players at that same position are going? I know you and I kind of view that through two different lenses, but that's for me is why I can't go Higbee over Troutman. But again, if you are left with guys like Higbee, then and Evan Ingram, I would probably end up going with a guy like Tyler Higbee because of, especially if you have Matthew Stafford, because of the fact that I think we're going to be able to trust him a little bit more since Gerald Everett is not there. So, look, stacking is, you said, again, is a plus EV, which means expected value for those of you that are not familiar with that term. We talk about it in the RotoBros Patreon all the time. I know, Mark, you probably want to expand on EV.
I mean, not really. It's a concept that's very popular in the industry now. People have been talking about, and it's just a mathematical term. It's all about basically value gained that hasn't materialized yet. It's not a super complex concept. It was easiest for me to understand playing DFS. You gain expected value in DFS by, like, if you've got two players at similar price points that project the same. Like, let's say you've got Deshaun Jackson and Henry Ruggs. They're both 4,500 on DraftKings, and they're both projected for about 10 or 12 DraftKings points. But Deshaun Jackson's going to be 30% owned, and Henry Ruggs is going to be 5% owned. Why are you playing chalk Deshaun Jackson, who's an incredibly high variance player? Why play Deshaun Jackson at 30% owned with such a high bust potential when you can just play Henry Ruggs, which is the same play at cost with the same projection at 5% owned? Deshaun Jackson can go out there and go for 5 points, and Henry Ruggs could go for 25. And then you have you have a massive edge over the field because you gained so much expected value before the game's even started by going with the lower owned play. They're both high variance plays, so go with the guy that the field is going to have less of. That's really the only principle. Now, you can adopt these principles in seasonal leagues and best ball and dynasty as well, which we've been talking about for months in the Discord. So that's the whole principle behind stacking. The whole stacking is just maximizing your upside, maximizing your ceiling, because ceiling and upside is what wins you championships. If you had Christian McCaffrey in 2019, who had a best ball win rate of like 34%, think about it. Your baseline probability to win that league at the start of the season is 8%. If you had Christian McCaffrey, your probability of winning that league nearly tripled. More than that, it quadrupled. You were looking at a 35% chance to win your league just by drafting Christian McCaffrey. So that's basically what we're talking about. Increasing your win probability. You can't be afraid of finishing last place in your fantasy league. You can't do it. If you're playing, if you're drafting a guy like Russell Gage over Henry Ruggs, Ruggs has such an exponentially higher ceiling and a higher chance of winning you a week that, like, why are you even playing? You're drafting Russell Gage over Henry Ruggs because you're afraid to finish last place when you should be more afraid to finish 4th or 5th place. you should drafting Henry Ruggs over Russell Gage is kind of like, all right, first round wide receiver, somebody who the team should be making a huge commitment to in year 2. He's going to be on the field a lot more. He has more spike week potential. He's got more potential to win me a week. If you're inserting Russell Gage into your lineup, it's like, he is what he is. He's probably going to get me 10 or 12 points. He would need to see 15 targets to get me 20 plus points. Henry Ruggs only needs to see 5 targets to get you 20 points. So that's basically where I'm going with this. Upside is going to win you a fantasy championship. Floor might be a little bit important, but it's nowhere near as important as ceiling. You cannot be afraid to lose. You need to be aggressively attacking first place probability. You need to be aiming for as much upside and jamming as much upside into your starting lineup and into your bench as you possibly can.
See, for me, it's and I don't disagree with you, but we see it differently a little bit here. And what I mean by that is, and I think a lot of people in our Discord are going to understand where I'm going with this. For me, it depends on if I'm taking, Henry Ruggs over Russell Gage. It's going to depend to me what my wide receiver core looks like. Because if I've already got Keenan Allen and CeeDee Lamb, I'm to be honest with you, I'm probably going to go with Russell Gage. I'm going to go with that higher floor probability, that weekly volume safety. I'll kind of dub it here. That weekly volume safety with a guy like Russell Gage, who can still, just because he might get 6 to 8 targets and 6 to 8 catches and 86 yards and no score. But there's going to be times where he is going over 100 yards still and getting into the end zone a time or two throughout the season. So there's going to be spike weeks for a guy like Russell Gage as well, with the way that he plays and the way that they deploy him, even with Kyle Pitts in this offense now. So for me, it's going to depend. If I have a weak wide receiving core, I'm going to say, look, now I'm plugging in as much upside as possible because I got nothing to lose, right? Like, I need as much juice in my offense as humanly possible. But if I've already got 2 guys that I can get that consistent wide receiver 1 high-end floor value every week, I'm going to stick to that same formula and keep that floor as high as possible with a guy like Russell Gage. So for me, it just depends on roster construction, roster build, and what your team makeup is. But for the most part, I'm right there with you. Like, you don't want to coach scared, you don't want to play fantasy football scared either. So in that aspect, like I said, I'm still with you. But for me, again, I'm just going to barely take Russell Gage. But like I said, it has to do with that roster construction for me.
If you're stacked at wide receiver, though, when is Russell Gage ever going to crack your lineup? Never. Because he's never going to put up a score that could rival CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, something like that.
Be a flex play.
Whereas Henry Ruggs could, though. So I am more inclined, like if I'm loaded at receiver, I am more inclined, especially in a best ball where I don't have to insert this guy into my lineup. He automatically does it by having a spike week. If I draft wide receivers early, if I take Devontae Adams and Stephon Diggs in the first 2 rounds, I would rather draft Henry Ruggs late, because when is Russell Gage's 12 points going to crack my lineup with those wide receivers? Probably never. When could Henry Ruggs? A few times. He's going to have a couple of massive spike weeks where he catches 2 bombs and inserts himself into my best ball lineup. So if I'm top heavy at receiver, I am a lot more inclined to take somebody with the astronomical upside as Henry Ruggs. So that's my counter argument to that. And if I'm like dead at receiver and I'm just looking for usable weeks in the 10th, 11th, 12th round, yeah, I'm more likely to take somebody with a lower floor like Russell Gage, because Russell Gage, I'm just looking for production at that point. And that's kind of the thesis too behind taking satellite backs late in drafts, like Darrington Evans, Gio Bernard, Tariq Cohen. If you have a fragile running back build where you need a lot of things to go right for this running back build to hit, those are very popular in best ball. I roll out that strategy a decent amount where I take Travis Etienne as my first running back and then kind of run that back with Javonte Williams or Trey Sermon or Chase Edmonds. I'm a lot more likely to take these satellite backs later in the draft because I'm just looking for usable weeks, because my running back core is so fragile and I need production somewhere at the running back position. You have a lot higher probability of that satellite back hitting because he can command 5 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown. All he needs is the game script to go his way. And game scripts are so fragile and unpredictable as is that you're just increasing your floor, but also giving yourself a decent amount of upside. So the principle is the same with satellite backs as it is with wide receivers. Like if I have a super strong running back group, like if I have Dalvin Cook and Antonio Gibson and DeAndre Swift as my first three running backs off the board, I'm less likely to take those satellite backs late because they're a lot less likely. Their 10 to 15 points is a lot less likely to make my lineup in a best ball league. However, if I take somebody with genuine bell cow upside significantly later in the draft, I can't really think of I guess Kenyon Drake might be a decent chance because he's got satellite back upside. Yeah, me too. But he's got that satellite back value right away. But if for any reason Josh Jacobs doesn't play, he's a bell cow for that week. He's probably going to clear. Yeah, he's going to clear 80% snaps. And in that case, he has just as high a probability to make my lineup as like a DeAndre Swift or Antonio Gibson would. So that's kind of the principle behind structuring your entire lineup. Don't just zoom in on the individual player you're about to draft. Think about how this one player could affect your lineup.
I'm glad that you mentioned Chase Edmonds and Kenyon Drake and running backs because that's going to be the next thing we get into. Right after we mention the RotoBros Fantasy Advice Lounge. Guys, you see it scrolling across your screen. You see it. The best hidden gem in all of in the entire fantasy industry, okay, is the RotoBros Fantasy Advice Lounge. It's not just for advice, but you can go there. You can help your fellow man. We're all there to help each other. There's no internet trolls or anything like that. There's a $2 tier and a $5 tier. Go to patreon.com/RotoBros. Sign up. Again, a $5 tier, which is the gold tier, and a $2 tier, which is the silver tier. Both tiers are going to get you access into the RotoBros Fantasy Lounge. Now, the gold tier, the $5 tier, is going to get you my NFL draft scouting briefs in the spring. You're going to get Mark's weekly DFS podcast that he does with our producer man, Joe. You're also going to get his Mark snaps and targets report, and you're going to get the RotoBros after party shows where it's unfiltered, uncensored, only for our patrons of the RotoBros. So check that out for sure. Again, that is patreon.com/RotoBros. We've got a channel in the Discord for everything best ball, DFS, season long in football, baseball, and basketball. So if you want to win money, if you want to learn some great tips, some great strategy, make some great friends, network in the industry, definitely check it out. We've got some great people in there. We've got a nice, large community. You guys are going to love it. I promise you. And guess what? The best part is your first month is always free. So if you don't like it for any reason, you cancel, and you're not out a dime. We're going to give you your money back, and it's only $2. You know, it's the silver tier is only $2, the gold tier is only $5. But if you hate it, get out of it. You won't hate it. We can promise you that, but you are going to get your first month free. So again, check it out, patreon.com/RotoBros. You'll receive an email. It'll give you a link that you'll click on directly into the Discord, and you'll be all set and you'll be ready to rock. So check us out in there because that place is popping all season long, especially during football season. So again, definitely check that out. Okay, so running backs, you had mentioned it. You mentioned Chase Edmonds. You mentioned Kenyon Drake. Kenyon Drake, a former Arizona Cardinal, okay? It was a little bit frustrating when we all thought that he was going to go, when he went from Miami to Arizona, we all got a little, excited. We thought, okay, this is it. This is Kenyon Drake and a Cliff Kingsbury offense. This is money in the bank. We're excited. He's going to be a bell cow. Oh, wait, no, he's not. But he is going to do something that we didn't think he would. We thought Chase Edmonds was going to be the guy that would be running the ball the most. It actually turned out to be Kenyon Drake. Okay, so Kenyon Drake finishes, surprisingly, under the radar as RB16 last year, even in PPR, and he didn't even lead the team in targets or receptions. That was Chase Edmonds. So now, Kenyon Drake is off to Las Vegas to play with the Raiders and Josh Jacobs and ruin Josh Jacobs' fantasy value. And now you have James Conner, who was signed with Chase Edmonds. So we have a conundrum here in this Cardinals backfield. And this, to me, Mark, is the perfect example. We had a discussion a few weeks ago about roster construction, 2 and 3 rounds into the draft and what you should do, running back or wide receiver. We're on two completely opposite ends of the spectrum here. But this is why I lean heavy toward getting those top-flight workhorse RB1s with a high amount of touch security like Eckler and Najee Harris and Zeke and Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones and guys like that. Because I don't want to be stuck in a situation, Mark, where I have to choose as my RB2 to be Chase Edmonds or even James Conner. And this, to me, is a backfield that a lot of people need to be wary of. I don't want either of these guys to be any higher than my RB3 on my team. And that is at the most. I don't want them touching my RB2 spot, either one of them, because you don't know week to week where it's going to go. We don't know who's going to lead the team in rushes. We don't know who's going to lead the team in receiving. Both of them are guys who are impactful in both areas of the running back game. So why are we trying to go out and say that Chase Edmonds is going to have this breakout season? James Conner is going to ruin Chase Edmonds' value. It might be the exact opposite. We don't know. So for me, I'm not really on either of these guys, and before I make any trades or try to acquire any of them, I think I want to make sure what's going to happen in this offense. Because right now, to me, it's a mess as long as James Conner, that's the big thing for him, is his health. As long as James Conner stays healthy, this backfield is going to be a massive headache.
That's because you're too much of a coward to target ambiguous backfields, which is such a plus EV move in fantasy football. Like,
oh no, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's
yes,
not.
It is.
No,
oh,
it's
my
not.
Goodness. Yes, it is. Targeting ambiguous backfields in fantasy football is such a plus EV move because nobody knows what's going to happen, and not knowing what's going to happen. Not knowing what's going to happen is part of the draw, though, because Chase Edmonds, who had 50% route participation last year, Kenyon Drake had 40%. Do we think James Conner is going to have the same route participation that Kenyon Drake was able to command, or do we think we could see a 20% increase in route participation for Chase Edmonds? Chase Edmonds could go from 50% route participation up to 70, and his targets could skyrocket. That could happen. He already saw 68 targets, caught 53 passes last year. He was reasonably productive, produced nearly 800 total yards while competing for touches with Kenyon Drake, who had like 250, 260 opportunities in his own right. I guess it all comes down to what you think could happen. And that's why I don't hate targeting either one of these guys. Chase Edmonds does have a multi-purpose skill set. And I like the fact he is one of those satellite backs that I am comfortable targeting because at the very least, his role as the team's primary pass catching back is safe. He's probably you can probably lock him in for 65, 70 targets again, but there is room for that target share to expand. There's room for it to expand with no Larry Fitzgerald on the team. Wide receiver 2 is very ambiguous with this team with Rondale Moore, Christian Kirk, and AJ Green. Larry Fitzgerald, Dusty Larry, isn't there to command as many targets as some of these other guys might be capable of doing at this point in their careers. There's somebody on this team, whether it be Chase Edmonds, whether it be Rondale Moore, or whether it be AJ Green, that is going to be a value. They're going to be a target value because they're going to command more targets than anyone else near their ADP. And that's why I'm interested in going after a Chase Edmonds in the 7th round, especially on a team where I might only have 1 or 2 running backs. Like if I start off my draft with like Dalvin Cook and then I hammer wide receivers in the rounds 2 through 5, 2 through 6, I'm comfortable going with Chase Edmonds as my RB2. It's ambiguous, it's dangerous, it's scary, but that's part of the allure of chasing first place in a fantasy football league. You target scary or dangerous situations because nobody knows what could happen, and that's baked into their ADP. You're getting guys with massive ceilings at a discount. That's the thesis behind drafting Travis Etienne in the 5th round. He's got to compete with a running back that had 300 opportunities last year and had a seemingly an all-purpose skill set, but Travis Etienne has the type of upside to command 80 or 90 targets and could end up being a league winner by the end of the season. I think Chase Edmonds has similar upside because he's been an efficient runner, but he's also been commanding targets his entire career. So I get that it's dangerous. I'm not going to argue with you. My argument with Edmonds and absorbing that risk in the 7th round as your RB2 or flex is he's got the upside to potentially win you your league because the opportunity cost is so low based on what he could have as a ceiling.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, the odds, and that's the thing. I talk about it all the time on the show. I am a man of the odds. What are the odds of the? I get that there is a world where this happens for Chase Edmonds, Mark, and I'm not saying avoid Chase Edmonds and James Conner or at all costs. I'm not saying that. Grab them at the right spot. Why would you want to roll that dice as your RB2? That is not, to me, at the most important position in fantasy football. We've established this. And so, to me, that is not a position that I want to be in at the running back spot. I don't want James Conner. I don't want to be worried about James Conner cucking Chase Edmonds at the goal line week after week. I don't want to worry about Chase Edmonds receiving workload to be capped by the fact that James Conner can be an effective receiver out of the backfield as well. That's the problem for me. If I'm going to take a risk like that, I will take a risk like that further down my lineup. I'll take a risk like that with my flex or with my RB3, the first running back off the bench. I'm fine with that. But as my RB2, I am not leaving my draft, and I'm not feeling good about it. If I have left my draft with Najee Harris as RB1, and then Chase Edmonds as RB2, or James Conner, that to me, that is as almost as fragile as it gets. I want as much security as possible at the most important position in fantasy football, and especially the one with the highest amount of turnover, right? So if I'm going to draft somebody at a position where there's so many injuries and there's so much turnover, okay, I want those guys, this kind of goes back to our other discussion, I want those guys to have as much touch security as possible. And so to me, Chase Edmonds doesn't have that. So if I'm going to risk that, I'm fine with risking it, but it's going to be further down my lineup. And look, again, we go back to the Higbee debate just a minute ago. We talked about how I like to look at the ADPs of players. And okay, if I'm going to take this player who I'm not wild about, I'm not doing backflips over Tyler Higbee, I'm not doing backflips over Chase Edmonds and James Conner, what is their ADP? And what players are going around that same ADP? Do I actually think that Chase Edmonds is probably going to be a better option in fantasy than Javonte Williams or Travis Etienne or even Darrell Henderson? I'm not convinced of that. I'm not convinced of that. And for me, I'm taking all three of those guys over Chase Edmonds. Whether it's my RB2 or my RB3 spot, if they're there, that's who I'm going with, because I trust them to be more heavily involved. There is just like there's a world where Chase Edmonds commands even more target share, even though I think the odds are very low. There's also a world where Javonte Williams is going into week 3 as the number 1 running back on the team, whether or not whether or not Melvin Gordon's healthy or not, who has also struggled with injuries. So the odds of those things happening, to me, are the number 1 reason why I'm taking those guys over guys like Chase Edmonds. Look, Chase Edmonds is going 79th overall in Superflex leagues. He's the 28th running back off the board in the 6th round. James Conner, however, now who do you want between the two if you had to choose? You heard the ADP numbers for Chase. James Conner, 103rd overall player, 36th running back in ADP, and he's going 2 rounds later in the 8th round. I think I might want to roll the dice a little bit more with James Conner, even though maybe the injury risk is a little higher. I might feel better, with my 3rd running back or my top flex running back as being James Conner rather than Chase Edmonds.
I think drafting either one of these guys at cost, especially on underdog, makes a ton of sense. But you mentioned Travis Etienne and Javonte Williams, and at least on underdog, I believe you're pulling ADPs from Fantasy Pros, Fantasy Data, which is
Fantasy
fine.
Data, yeah.
But I view underdog ADP as a more stable form of ADP because there is a significantly larger sample of drafts taking place on underdog than on sleeper right now. Sleeper ADP is going to stabilize in a couple of weeks when everyone starts drafting for their seasonal leagues. But think about how unstable and how fragile ADP on Fantasy Pros and Fantasy Data is right now because of how little leagues are drafting right now. There's so many leagues out there that are going to wait until the 3rd week of the preseason to draft. And underdog, there are thousands and thousands of drafts going on each day. Right now, the opportunity cost for Chase Edmonds, you need to take him over guys like Antonio Brown, Damian Harris, Will Fuller, Curtis Samuel, Hollywood Brown, Raheem Mo, and that is a risk I'm more than willing to take because I think Chase Edmonds has like 80 target upside if he gets a 50 or 60% snap share, a snap share higher than what he commanded last year. For example, last year, he only saw a 45% snap share and a 37.6% opportunity share. Both of those were outside the top 35 at the running back position. So he could see an increased role, just assuming they give James Conner less work than they gave Kenyon Drake. Kenyon Drake was like a borderline bell cow last year. He had no business being that because he was playing hurt for so long. But there is a world here where Chase Edmonds sees an expanded role. He's commanding a higher opportunity share and a higher snap share. And if that does happen, he could eclipse 100 or 125 carries, and he could eclipse 80 targets. He saw 68 targets last year on 50% route participation. So if that route participation increases, that target share will increase, the raw targets will increase, and his overall upside will be higher. There's a world, there's a range of outcomes where he eclipses 1,000 yards, and he wasn't that far off last year. He was at about 850 total yards last year, 53 receptions. And that's why I think there is a lot more upside here than meets the eye with Chase Edmonds.
Again, I don't disagree, but it is at cost for me. It is at cost, and it depends on roster construction. And I've laid it out a couple times on a couple different shows now. And it goes back to how we are building our rosters. And I think you and I in the early rounds, we both agree that you never want to. And I was just telling people in the Discord this today, sharing this wealth of knowledge that you'll get in the RotoBros Fantasy Lounge. You never want to, and this is something that you and I agree on. You never want to. It's fine to go into your fantasy draft with a strategy in the first 2, maybe even 3 rounds. But you don't want to leave the 3rd round and go into the 4th round and saying, this is what I'm doing. I have made the decision. No matter what happens, this is what I'm doing. But what happens if this draft doesn't go how you thought it would? You never want to pigeonhole yourself into a strategy that doesn't end up turning out the way that you thought it would, right? So if that's why it's a dangerous game. The first 2 to 3 rounds you can kind of predict for the most part, but after that, you better just let the board fall to you. And that's something that you and I agree. Now, in those first 2 to 3 rounds, if you're building on all wide receivers and you're going like Tyreek in the first, or and then Keenan Allen in the second, or something like that. Look, you build your roster the way you want to. That's not how I'm ever going to do it. But then you better be prepared to deal with the uncertainty. And to me, the unlikely odds that Chase Edmonds gives you this borderline RB1 value. I don't think that we're living in a world here. Again, this is all out the window if James Conner gets hurt. James Conner gets hurt tomorrow at practice, all bets are off. Chase Edmonds to the moon. But we're not predicting injuries here. As long as James Conner is there, I have a hard time believing that Chase Edmonds is going to wind up as what Kenyon Drake was last year at RB16, or even better than that. And look, I'm fine with that if I own Chase Edmonds as my RB3 or worse. And to be honest with you, I'd rather have him as my RB4 if anything else, because at that point, if I just have a rash of injuries, bad luck, at least I have a quality guy, or what could be a quality guy, that upside, that ceiling that we've talked about, coming off my bench, and that I'm really excited for. So, again, it just depends on how you're building your draft in the first couple rounds for me.
Yeah, I'm not even going to disagree with you. My biggest thing is I am more comfortable in uncomfortable scenarios than you are. And I think that's just a matter of playing style. You prioritize safety just a little bit more than I do. I prioritize upside just a little bit more than you do. And I don't think I don't think either one of us are playing the game incorrectly or improperly. I think one of us, we've already determined, we've both been playing this game for so long, but one thing I will make clear is even though I've been playing fantasy football since I was in 7th grade, I've been playing for like 15 years, really the only years of experience that matter are probably the last 3 or 4 for me, because the first 10 years I played fantasy football, I wasn't any good. I wasn't using plus EV strategy. I wasn't maximizing my upside or optimizing my lineups. I was
the game changed too. The game has changed too. I mean, let's be honest there as well.
Yeah, I wasn't actively seeking out edges the way I should have been because I didn't know any better. I was focusing in on the players and the plays. I was focusing in on, I got to draft this guy and then I got to draft this guy, instead of thinking like, how can I maximize my upside? I can maximize my upside and my massive scoring potential by like, all right, I've got Keenan Allen. So I don't want to take the quarterback because what if Justin Herbert has a bad week? Then Keenan Allen is screwed and my floor is low. When I should have been thinking, I got to take Justin Herbert here because if Justin Herbert has a good week, Keenan Allen is going through the moon, and I've got to get fewer things right. I believe I've understood for a few years now why stacking makes sense, but I want to recommend an episode of the Codebreaker podcast for anyone that listens to Roto Underworld Radio. Josh Larkey did a fantastic podcast on just the concept of stacking and why it's so plus EV, and he explained it in words significantly better than I ever could. So I want to make sure I'm giving credit where credit is due, but make sure you go and listen to that podcast because it explains stacking and why stacking increases your win probability so much. But where I was going with that is I am more inclined to prioritize upside. I am not scared of finishing in last place. Like I said earlier, you cannot be afraid to lose in your fantasy draft.